Hey everybody, Josh here once again, and wow, have you all responded to our top 5 tubeless wheel and tire mistakes that people are making. We've had so many good questions, amazing first 24 hours of viewership and recommendations and comments and questions. So we thought we would take some of those best questions and put them together with some tips and tricks, and we'll call this one 5 things about tubeless rim, wheel, valve, tire maintenance that nobody is telling you, or at least not anybody that I'm seeing. Number 1, this comes up all the time, and I think the industry's just done a terrible job messaging this. Tubeless and tubeless ready are 2 totally different things. So you can see in here the difference. I've got a tubeless tire, which has a nice, beautiful coating of rubber. It is a tooled rubber molded surface on the inside of the tire. This tire can be installed and run tubeless without sealant. A tubeless tire is like a car tire. They tend to be a little heavier. They maybe don't roll as fast in some of the testing, but they are easier to work with, tubeless. TL, a lot of brands will use. TLR, if you have TLR on the side of your tire, it's tubeless ready, and you can see the difference here. And there's a wide range of what different companies consider TLR. But generally, if you can see raw fibers on the inside of the tire, and if we call out like the Challenge tires, or probably the Rene Hurst ultralight casing tires are really notable here in that they have the raw casing fibers more or less exposed on the inside. These are tires that must be used with sealant to be made tubeless. And the manufacturers hate it when I say it like this, but in a way, a tubeless ready tire is a little bit like take and bake bread. It's like 75% of the way there, and then you are kind of finishing the manufacturing of this tire with the sealant that you add in. That sealant is going to essentially soak into that casing and harden into a sealed inner surface. Why is that important? Well, this is important because these tires will eat various amounts of sealant on the initial install, and I think that's something that nobody's telling you and nobody's thinking about, but you can kill your sealant installation in some of these tires in a week because they just absorb and require so much sealant to fill up all those little spaces within the fibers, to load the fibers themselves up to make the tire airtight. And so, I know we hear it, I know all the sealant brands hear it, I did this install with this tire and the sealant lasted a week. Well, you'll oftentimes see like little bubbling or kind of oozing, weeping of the sealant at the tire sidewall. That is the tire, essentially the finishing of the production of the tubeless tire, and that is consuming sealant. So, if you have a TLR tire, give it a look. If it's one of the lighter tires, I would say in general, the lighter it is, the more sealant it's going to consume to become airtight. And so just be a little bit patient with tires like this, because you might get it installed, the next day it's flat, you might need to add some more sealant. It's going to require a little bit of extra attention, but given some time and the correct maintenance schedule and keeping that sealant topped off with, if you're using SILCA sealant, you just keep putting replenisher in there. If you're using another brand of sealant, just add more of that sealant. That will eventually get that thing sealed up and functioning properly, but you will have to stay on top of it for, I've seen some tires up to a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks to really get there. So remember that difference. Tubeless and TLR, not the same thing. Number 2, checking your sealant, and this really comes from kind of number 1. How do I know if I have enough sealant and if it's good? And the answer there is really just to give it a shake and listen for it. I'm actually, pardon my reach here, you should be able to hear the sealant. It should sound kind of like water when it's inside the tire. The sealant does not harden overnight, and it doesn't even harden over a very quick period of time. It thickens. It goes from, call it a watery, more or less viscosity to something like a maple syrup, and eventually sort of a honey, and then it hardens. So if it starts to sound slow when you shake it, you need to add some more. Again, with SILCA, you can add replenisher, and that'll replenish it a little bit. But once it gets to about honey or thicker, there's no bringing it back, no matter what brand or type of sealant you're using. So you really want to, I'd say once a week. I mean, just give it a quick shake. It's 2 seconds. You don't even have to take the wheel off the bike. Just lift it up. You just kind of give it a shake at the bottom, or maybe give it a spin and stop it suddenly. You'll hear it sloshing. If you can hear it slosh and it's watery-ish, you're fine. When it gets quiet, add more. Tubeless tape and tubeless tape installation. So, when we first launched SILCA Sealant, one of the things that we started to see pretty quickly that we didn't fully understand was damage to rim tape. People were saying, your sealant is eating our rim tape. And we thought, oh my God, is there something in our sealant that is eating into these rim tapes? And what we learned is that there's really 2 major categories of rim tape out there. You've got the tensilized polypropylene tapes, and these are the typically bright colored tapes that are a little bit stiffer on the install, and they never have printing on them because the material is so dense molecularly that you cannot print on it. Tensilized polypropylene. This is the stuff that when you buy a new refrigerator or appliance that's all taped and held together for shipping with this stuff. It's incredibly strong. It's used to bundle steel rods for transportation in the back of trucks across the country from steel manufacturing facilities. This really is the best tape you can get. It's sold by a number of companies out there. Stan's is probably the most famous, but 3M and Tessa make standard versions of it. There's really only a couple companies in the world that produce it. So we'll put some links down below. This is the best stuff that you can get, and I can't say that we ever see problems with that. The second type of tape, which has become really popular in recent times because you can print on it, is a laminated vinyl with a PET coating. Now, vinyl, the base layer is essentially like an electrical tape, and they're able to print and then over-laminate with a clear PET film. And these tapes always have printing and branding. They're typically black with white printing, but there are other colors. And the challenge is that, PET, which is essentially like a soda bottle plastic, or we use it for some of our the clear bottles in our lubricant line, it's not all that abrasion resistant. And so in a sealant that has an additive, a filler like SILCA sealant with carbon fiber, those carbon fibers actually can act as an abrasive and abrade away that PET coating. Now, again, we thought at first, is this chemical? What's happening? And the more we've looked, and we can link below, there's hundreds of forum chat threads and sites out there talking about any additive to a sealant, whether it's our carbon fiber, glitter seems to be particularly bad. The Stan's Race Day, which I believe uses some sort of like a cornmeal, coarse cornmeal type additive. All of those little particles can abrade that PET layer away, causing a breakdown of that tape. And the PET layer is there for protection of the printing, but it is also structural. So if you're using a tape of that style, you need at least 2 wraps. You need a wrap that essentially can take the abrasion of the sealant particles, whatever you're using, and then you need the one under it to be protected to actually maintain the structure. So 2 wrap minimum. We recommend the tensilized polypropylene tapes. They're just stronger, overall better performance, and they're not damaged by any of these particulates that any of the sealant companies are using. And if you're homebrewing your own and using glitter or something like the Effetto Mariposa additive, they're safe for use with that as well. So let's talk install of this tape. As you guys probably know, keeping tension as you install the tape is super important. You cannot have wrinkles because obviously air can get out through those wrinkles. But when you're finishing, the challenge is that when the last, call it 10 centimeters as you finish, you cannot get good tension in that. And we've seen a lot of cases where you have leakage or, God forbid, you're blowing up a carbon rim. And I know bike shops are familiar with this. You guys might not all have heard of it, but if you get leakage from the tire cavity into the inside of the rim, you can actually explode the rim itself. And here's some pictures we found from the internet. It happens more often than you think. Oftentimes it's happening at the bike shop level, and so it's not directly affecting the customer, but it is one of the big downsides of using a compressor is that you can actually explode your rim. A lot of these, when these happen, they're either coming from a leak at the valve stem or a leak at that seam end of the tape. And so what I recommend is finishing up, and you don't have any tension in that last little bit, but you want to hit it with, I like Starbond. It basically is like a cyanoacrylate, an acrylic-based glue. Super glue works there. Starbond comes with a number of kind of very controlled tips, and so you want just get a little bit on there, and it will harden, and that will keep that end pinned down so that it doesn't come up over time or during the install as you're dragging the bead over it. So just a tiny little drop. I know some people will use like a little silicone adhesive or RTV there, and that works really well. The problem is just it typically takes a few hours to cure. So if you want it instant, hit it with a little bit of Starbond and you'll be in good shape. The other thing with the tape install you want to think about is the valve. There are a lot of companies out there recommend this sort of X-cut technique when you install the valve. Take a knife tip or an X-Acto blade, make an X and push the valve through that. I do not recommend that. I've seen way too many times where that cut essentially forms a stress riser in the film, which is under pressure, and that cut wants to run. And this makes sense. You think about like, potato chip bag, right? That's a similar tensilized material. It's incredibly strong, but if you get a perfect cut in it, then that cut will run quite easily. What you want to do instead is use an awl or like a 00 Phillips head screwdriver, and you actually want to puncture through the center of that. And that puncture will not want to run, but that puncture also, as you push the valve through, will grow with that valve as it's coming in and give you a better seal. So use an awl. In an absolute pinch, you can use a toothpick. A steel awl is probably my favorite preferred method. We'll put some links below to the one that we use here in our shop. But the other thing that you can do, or that I like to do, is you have a little paintbrush, and I will just paint a little bit of sealant onto that hole right before I push the valve in, and that just gives you a little bit of a seal that when you're beating the tire up under pressure, if there is a little bit of an air leak there, you get a chance that the sealant can seal it, whereas otherwise when you're beating the tire up, you don't have any sealant coating on the rim tape or in that valve area yet. That doesn't happen until you're riding and it's bouncing and sloshing around, so a little bit of sealant there. And then, of course, push it in hard. Make sure you're using the right valve. Get it pushed in all the way. And you want that nut on there nice and tight so that you're not having any air gaps under that. So now that we're talking about valves, let's go to number 4, the valve and core maintenance. This is one that really frustrates me because I feel like every pro mechanic, world tour mechanic I know does this, and I see it sometimes at shops, but I've never seen anybody talking about it on YouTube or places like this, and that is maintenance or maintaining your valve cores so that they don't get clogged with sealant. I know our sealant seals amazingly well. We get tons of complaints about valve stem clogging, and there is a solution. I mean, this is the better the sealant, the more likely it is to clog the valve, but the key is to prep the valve so that it doesn't get clogged in the first place. And what we recommend is Synergetic or Synergy. If you have seen the videos on these products, it's a Type 5, very exotic synthetic oil with a tungsten disulfide nanoparticles. Synergy actually has a little bit more of the particles and a little bit more higher viscosity oil, and also a little bit of calcium sulfonate, which is an anti-corrosive. So Synergy probably works a little better in this application, but Synergetic is amazing. And what it does is the particles work their way into the little machine marks and the nooks and crannies and the pores of the metal or the anodize that they coat. And so what we recommend is to get some cheap pipe cleaners. If you have kids, you probably have these somewhere in your house. If not, you can get them for a couple of dollars on Amazon. And you want to get that pipe cleaner nice and coated and run it through the center of that valve. Coat the inside of the valve stem that's going to be in contact with the sealant, and then really give it a nice wipe. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow all those little tungsten disulfide nanoparticles to get into those nooks and crannies. It's going to give you a little protective coating, kind of like a little nonstick spray when you're cooking an egg or making an omelet. And then you want to take your valve core, and we sell them in these little like crack baggies. I always put a squirt of the Synergetic or Synergy in the baggie and just let them soak in that. And what that's going to do is really make sure all the little, again, nooks and crannies, pores of the metal, the seals are coated with this. And I guarantee you, no sealant on earth, not even the SILCA stuff, wants to stick to these tungsten disulfide particles or this oil. So as long as you have even just a fraction of a micron of coating of the Synergetic or the Synergy on there, the sealant's just going to want to run away. The tungsten disulfide, it's actually used in a lot of naval vessel, the paint on the hulls, that it makes it easier. Barnacles won't stick to it. Bureau of Land Management has it approved for bridge pilings. Again, barnacles and things, they just don't stick to it very well. And so just giving it that light coating will make a huge difference. And then the nice thing with the pipe cleaner is that every time you do a sealant addition or a refresh, you can just chase that with the pipe cleaner again with a coating of the Synergy on it to flush that out, make sure your valve core looks good, screw it all back together, and you're really going to save yourself a lot of headaches. The other thing that you need to be aware of is just where your valve stems are when you're storing the bike, right? As you're riding, especially off-road, all that shaking and sloshing, you're going to end up with sealant in the valve. And so the best way to deal with that is to store with your valve stems both at like a 5 o'clock position when the bike is sitting, and that allows any sealant that's gotten in there to run out. And again, if you've got your nice Synergy coating, it's all going to run out and you're fine. So the key with that, don't use too much. This is definitely one where more isn't better. You do not want to squirt it in there or drip it directly in the valve core. That's just going to get in and contaminate things. So you just want a very fine, we're talking like micron coating. So tape installation, be careful with that one, and valve cores. Number 5, inserts. So many questions about inserts. And in the last video, we talked about using the channel to get the tire on and off. And this is so hard with inserts. You really have to be careful both on the install and, for me, the worst part of inserts is the removal of the tire. On the install, you really want to try to use your finger pressure to hold that insert out as far radially outward in the tire as possible so that it's not preventing the bead from getting into that groove in the rim. If you can manage to keep that out and work your way around, keeping tension with the bead in that groove, you can generally install with the insert pretty easily. The challenge becomes when you go to get it off and that insert is there pushing the tire out on that little bead shelf, making it super hard to get that tire off. And so you really have to pick a spot. I always start opposite the valve and really work probably about a 90-degree section of tire off the bead. I mean, really, it can take a lot of force. And there are tools for this. We'll put a link below. It looks a little bit like a bead jack, but it's sort of like a wrench, I guess the best, a pliers almost, with sort of a soft bar that you can use to pop the bead in. You want to break a section free and then really use your fingers to try to work that insert radially outward into the tire again so that you can get the bead into that groove. And then once you've got the insert sort of squished out radially, you can begin to work your way around both directions at the same time, continuing to push it out. So you're putting tension in that insert, but you are pulling it radially outward, allowing that bead to get in. It is the only way to do it. I am not going to lie, at the World Tour level, a lot of the teams that we've worked with, and I feel terribly guilty having done this myself, but a lot of times we will just take a big wire cutter and just cut through the tire, pull the liner out like a snake, and then throw the tire away. It's an awful waste, but at that level, taking half an hour to debead a tire, it's just not workable. When you're trying to do 30, 40, 50 wheels in a day, even if you have a couple of mechanics, sometimes it's just not workable. So there is an element, and I think we had a couple of comments in the last one, like, I don't know how to get this off and I want to just throw it away. I completely feel your pain. And even at the absolute tip-top level of professional mechanics, they feel the same way. So there you go. My 5 things that, I don't know, maybe you've heard them before. Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Your feedback, your comments really help us make these videos better as we go forward. We love getting your comments and questions. And please tell your friends some of this stuff. If it's frustrating you, it's probably frustrating just about everybody you know. And maybe you can make their day a little bit easier next time they need to do some wheel and tire maintenance. If you like this, check out one of these other videos on tips, tricks, maintenance, and a couple of videos are on fails that we've covered in the past. Thanks for watching.